So I'm laying in bed watching Netflix when my Apple Watch haptic feedback taps me on the wrist. Expecting a text notification, I turn my wrist. The notification read, "Take 10 seconds to breathe," which I probably should do right now. It kind of surprised me that an app was telling me to relax and breathe, but ultimately it brought to light that Apple was tracking my heart rate in an attempt to put that information into context for me. You know, it's amazing how fast wearable technology is growing, specifically thinking about ways we can utilize data to help really our decision making in our lives. So since high school, I've always had the urge to make money, whether it was buying and selling things on eBay, working in a coffee shop, or even just waiting tables in my father's restaurant. None of that really seemed satisfying to me, until one day, a group of older friends were ecstatic about the amount of money they were making in the stock market. Some of them investing a couple $1,000s, making 30 to 50% of their money in a matter of months. This is clearly a lot more than like a couple $100s I made in a coffee shop. So the following day, I ran to Borders, eager to learn about the stock market. Bought a bunch of books, sat down, and read all these different books on different financial instruments. One of the many books I read was called Reminiscence of a Stock Operator, which tells the story of a young trader who pursues his career on Wall Street and describes his experiences both positive and negative when it came down to the uncertainty and volatility in the market. The book is set in the early 1900s, when trading was all in paper form and you relied solely on a ticker tape for all of your information. This stuck out to me because technology had obviously changed drastically since then. Considering how we trade today, using online discount brokers and trading platforms, all the way to how we speculate the news and fundamentals of a particular investment. Some of the many things that I learned from that process was that trading was ultimately, was really learning about how his emotion really affected a lot of the decisions he made. We're all exposed to our emotional vulnerabilities. I first opened up a trading account when I was 18, and boy was I excited. First thing an eager, young, inspired, ambitious teenager thinks when they get access to the stock market is this idea of making a ton of money off of some company you just did research on. But I can assure you that was not the case. At first, it felt like I would buy and sell stocks like throwing a dart at a bullseye blindfolded. In fact, in the first 6 months, I lost all the money I invested by trading too often and too emotional. The first person I told, which some of my friends wouldn't be surprised from me telling my mother that I'd lost all my money, she responded with, "Well, that sucks. Maybe you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket." You know what? She was right. It really did suck. I mean, when you're 18, $2,000 really meant like I'd lost everything. However, I somewhat enjoyed the thrill of treating the market like a casino. It really taught me a lot of different lessons of how my own emotion was influenced by these different factors, news, and technology. So given this task, 4 years later, I still, I'm learning. You're always constantly learning. So this year I've had, obviously, a design thesis for my 5th year. And given this struggle, I decided to say, hey, let's go research behavioral finance, which, boy, is a huge topic. So based on my past experience, I love this quote. It says, "Investing isn't about beating others at their game. It's about controlling yourself at your own game." So the thesis inquiry starts with a question. You ask yourself a question as a starting point for the direction you wish to pursue. So the question I asked here was, how do we help investors better their investment decisions by bringing awareness to their behavior? After identifying this thesis inquiry, I set out to conduct research on behavioral finance, reading articles, collecting a ton of literary review to figure out what direction the design would need to take and what is that opportunity gap. So the cycle of market emotions, which describes a lot of the emotions an investor may experience, starts with understanding that behavioral finance is really influenced by psychological factors like mood, emotion, and cognitive biases. So an investor may experience all of these emotions, but for the sake of my research, I chose to focus on the emotions that had the most impact on the decision-making process. For example, optimism. Set ourselves with a positive outlook and set goals for reasons why we choose to invest, whether it's for long-term retirement, buying a new car, or even paying for a vacation. Along that emotional journey, many experience euphoria, where investors and ourselves are at high risk. This is investing in a stock that continuously rises without thinking about the possibility that it may inevitably retreat. It's sort of how sheep herd together until a pack of wolves come along and everyone goes running in fear. The next most common and key emotion is anxiety. And we all experience anxiety. Again, I'm maybe experiencing some of that right now. Anxiety pushes investors to lose about 3% per year. But it's good to mention that anxiety doesn't actually push the decision choice, which brings me to fear. When we're afraid, it's the fear that ultimately pushes us to sell, pushes us to make that decision. You know, if I'm moderately afraid or moderately anxious, we tend to self-reflect. You know, I'll self-reflect and I'll evaluate myself, which will help me to prevent myself from making an irrational decision. Well, if those anxiety levels are really high, then you have a higher chance of making an irrational decision. So after doing all of this behavioral finance research, I still didn't feel confident I knew the direction the research needed to take to still solve that initial inquiry. This feeling of complacency lasted about 3 weeks until my friends and I went downtown to Cafe Cubal, and you wouldn't have guessed what had happened that day. Just by chance, I glanced over to a table nearby, and I noticed an article in the New York Times that said, "Measuring gut feelings in the market." Coincidence. The New York Times article spoke about a theory developed by a trader named John Coates, who recently became a researcher at Cambridge University. And him and his team were studying the theory that investors were having gut feelings or being successful by having gut feelings about their trades. I mean, after finishing this article, you could tell, I'm super nerdy. I ran out of there with that article, super stoked that I knew other researchers were researching this topic. I hit Google, and I looked into what they published on their research. And the title I found was called Interoceptive Ability Predicts Survival on a London Trading Floor. So, what is interoception? I had no idea then. Interoception is the sensing of physiological behaviors that originate inside our bodies, like hunger, pain, and heart rate. Now, individuals, in this case, who have a higher sensitivity to those interoceptive signals tend to perform better in risky decision-making. So the study, as I read further, I learned that they took 18 traders engaged in high-frequency trading. So essentially what that meant is that they bought and sold futures contracts for a short period of time. This type of trading requires an ability to assimilate a lot of information that flows through multiple different feeds, then identifying those price patterns and making a larger risky decision. And the study conducted was to measure the differences in a trader's ability to detect their interoceptive signals through something called a heartbeat detection task. So the task for the trader was to silently count, without touching your chest or your pulse point, see how many heartbeats they could count in a specific time interval. The researchers would then compare that with their actual heartbeat. So in an attempt to test their hypothesis that the interoceptive accuracy predicted trading performance, they pulled the data of their daily profit and loss over the previous year, and they found a few significant conclusions. First one was that the traders who had better heartbeat detection scores were in fact more profitable traders. The second is that our heartbeat detection ability actually increases during stress, which I found pretty significant. And the third was that their control group, who were non-trading individuals, had lower scores than the traders. So like in trading and other professions, the people who are more successful are more in control and tend to are even more successful than beginners. So I said, maybe the opportunity gap here is to take this data and show it to the traders. And what if we tested this theory on a larger set of traders, not just 18, but all of Wall Street? So the criteria to design for here are as follows. It's heart rate variability, which they have proven works as a metric to design for, market volatility for overall context, and then trading activity, which would act as buy and sell behavior. So I set out to mock up some of my design, and the initial prototype that's currently in development will allow for the use of current wearables on the market. My goal with that is that I want to make this tool accessible. Wearables are pretty accessible on the market right now and well known, so that experience is familiar. Not only that, we want to monitor this data in the most less intrusive way as possible. So heart rate variability would track the background, while the software front end would act as a self-reflection tool for the trader, where they can upload their information and then identify patterns of their own, but instead of it being patterns about their investment, it's more patterns geared towards their behavior. So as we dive deeper into this conceptual age, which is really messy, I urge everyone to think about how different applications, different technology is really influencing our behavior, for better and worse, and to really think about, not just high-stress professions, but think about technology like social media and applications we use every day on our cell phone, how those apps are making us more addictive. I think the most common one that I've been relating with recently is Instagram. Think about how many likes you get. Think about even how excited you are when you get more likes than expected. And another recent one, which my brother has told me about, is continuing a Snapchat streak with your friends. I mean, you have to do that? You have to continue it with your friends? Is that necessary? But I mean, think about it. I challenge everyone today. Think of new ways that you can create technology, new ways to create applications that can make us improve our decision-making, improve our productivity, and most of all, our health. Thank you.